Hey, welcome to this video lesson on labor budgets. So in previous lessons, we've talked about the importance of satisfying your customer. That one of your primary jobs as a manager in the janitorial industry is to take care of and make sure your customers are satisfied. They're happy with the service that your company is providing. And so we know that's important, right? It's perhaps the most important thing that we do. But sometimes that can be taken to an extreme that we can also end up hurting the organization as a whole. So let me explain what I mean by that. So imagine you have a customer, and let's just say it's an office building, and you have 10 hours a night is your budget to get the job done within 10 hours. Now, you as a manager want to make sure that you do a really, really good job for that customer. And so instead of spending 10 hours a night just to make sure that nothing goes wrong, the customer is totally satisfied and happy, you put 20 hours of labor on that job every night. Now, the result of that is the building likely is going to just be spotless. That the customer is going to have no complaints. In fact, they're probably going to give you rave reviews about how excellent your service is in their facility. Now, what's the problem with this? Hopefully you see it already. You're spending 10 extra hours every night on that building. So instead of making a little bit of profit for your organization, you're now losing money on that account every month. And what that means is you are actually paying the customer to clean their building. So the moral of this story is hopefully that we know that taking care of the customer is critical, probably the most important objective in our job. But that being said, there is another objective that must remain front and center as well, and it is making sure that our jobs are done profitably. And for you as a manager in the industry, what that means is understanding your labor, because labor is the primary expense on a job site. So what we're going to do in this video, we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into labor and how that cost is made up, so you can understand the labor costs within a job. And so when you have a budget of 5 hours or 10 hours a night in a building, where does that number come from, and how does it relate to the profitability of the job? And then we'll look at we'll think through a little bit on how labor affects profitability and how you can actually affect labor in order to manage those jobs more efficiently, all the while making sure the customer is happy. So let's dive in and take a look at how these labor budgets are built so we can get a better understanding of this. So we've talked a little bit about labor budgets and their importance and how it's important for you to be profitable and stay within that budget that's set for that job. So let's look a little more in depth at how that cost is generated so you can understand where those numbers come from, so that when you work to be efficient on your counts and make sure they're profitable, you can understand how to do that and how that works. So imagine you have someone working on site for you and they make a certain wage, okay? And this is important because what we want to do is understand how much an employee costs per hour for the company. So let's just say, for the sake of example, that you have employees that make $12.50 an hour. Okay, so that's the take-home pay that is used or calculated when an employee gets their check. Now, your company spends additional money on top of this in taxes, in insurance, in employment benefits, or, retirement health insurance, vacation, that sort of thing. And so there's additional costs on top of this, somewhere in the order of 15 to 20% on top of that. So, and you could talk to whoever in your company that does this sort of thing to get a better understanding of that. But for the sake of our example, we'll just say it's an additional $2.50 on top. So an additional close to 20% on top of that. And this means that total, our cost per employee hour is $15. All right. So this is how we calculate or come up with how much each employee working on site costs the organization. Now let's look real quickly at actually what a full budget for a job is. And this is going to be something that the person who does sales at your organization, that they will put together when they're submitting a proposal, they put together an estimate first. And so let's take a look real quick at what an estimate looks like and how the labor factors in, so you can see how big of a deal labor typically is on a job. Okay, so every job budget, there's a building that's going to be cleaned, and it takes a certain amount of hours to clean it, and someone's got to figure out how much do we charge the customer. And this is essentially broken down into, we have certain costs that we incur as a company, and then we have a markup that we put on top of those costs, and we add those two together, and then we get our selling price, okay? So we have costs, and then markup, and then selling price. So we've already looked at how much our labor costs us, all right? And so in a budget, the cost section usually looks something like this. We have our labor costs, all right? And that will include those taxes and insurance and that sort of thing. And usually this number here is going to be about 50 to 60% of the overall costs on the job. So we have labor, and then we're going to have supplies. And this is going to be things like mops and rags and chemical and that sort of thing. Expenses that are usually going to be in the, anywhere from 10 to 50, 100, $200. And usually this number is only 3, 4, 5% of the total expense on the job. And then we're going to have equipment. And then we can put on here, we'll just call them other expenses, okay? And these are going to be things like, maybe there's a cell phone that's needed at that particular job site, or a laptop, or maybe some uniform expense, or something else you're going to need to get the job set up. But most of the costs for the jobs are pretty straightforward. It's labor, supplies, equipment, and then some other costs. And then we will mark up that job. All right, so if we're using some real numbers, it might look something like this. So let's say that we have a building that's 30,000 square feet, okay? And if we clean at about 3,000 square feet an hour, it means a 30,000 square foot building is going to take us about 10 hours to clean, okay? So if we have, so let's say it's 10 hours a night, and there are 21 working days in a given month. So that means we're going to have a total of 210 hours per month, right? And if we multiply that times our $15 an hour, and that brings our total to $3,150 per month for labor costs on this account. So let's say supplies are going to be about, let's just say $300 a month. Equipment, let's just say for the sake of argument, is $300 a month. And other expenses related to this job are $200 a month. All right. And so this is going to give us a total of $39.50 a month is our total costs on this job. All right, and then let's say we would mark up this job. Let's say we would add $1,000 profit to this job, and our total selling price is going to be $49.50 for this account. All right, that's our monthly selling cost. Now, here's why I point all of this out to say, when it comes to being profitable as a company, what is the biggest number, the thing that we can most control to either save money on a job or lose money on a job? It's going to be our labor. You can see far and away, labor is 10 times greater than any other expense on the job budget, on the job profit and loss statement. And so this is why when we talk about labor budgets, or you monitoring or managing the hours worked in a building in a given night, labor is the number one thing. So we could be really efficient with supplies and equipment and some of these other expenses, and that's good. But even if we're really thrifty on those points, we're still not going to be able to save a lot of money. Or if we overspend, we're not going to lose very much money. But when it comes to labor, if we go over our labor by too much, that's where we can lose money really fast. And if we start to save labor on any given night, this is where we can start saving money and increasing the profitability on the job really quickly. Okay, so let's take these numbers here, and then let's talk for a second about how we can actually save money on a job site. So this one here is a 10-hour-a-night job. So maybe that means you have 2 employees, each working 5 hours a night. So we want to monitor that and manage that to make sure we're sort of in that window. Now, let's think for a second. What if we were able to reduce the amount of hours worked in that building and by 1 hour a night? And now, before we did this, we would want to make sure, remember our primary goal is to make sure the customer is satisfied. So anytime we're going to reduce labor, we want to make sure that the quality of the work doesn't go down. So maybe we do this by having better equipment on site. Maybe we're more efficient in the way that we work. Maybe you have a couple people on site that they're just more productive and we can get more work done. All right. So whatever the case may be, maybe we can lower that down. So let's look at how that actually impacts the profitability on this job. So remember, our cost is $15 an hour, all right, per hour worked on the job site. So let's imagine that we save an hour a night, which means we're going to save $15 per night, okay? And there's 21, on average, 21 working days per month, okay? So this means we're going to save roughly $315 in a given month, just by reducing our labor by 1 hour. And you can see on the flip side, what that means is if we increase our labor every night and we don't stay within budget, we could actually reduce our profit by $315. And so if we increase labor by just 3 hours a night on average, we could end up erasing all of the profit that we would make on this particular account. And you know well enough to know that your job and your salary and how you make your money is contingent upon us being profitable on all of these accounts. All right, so hopefully you can see from this example, this very simple example, every job is basically built like this. The hours may be different, the total amount of labor may be different, but roughly all jobs are built in the same way. And for every job that you manage, labor is the biggest cost. And your job is to balance being profitable with also taking care of the customer. And you're able to do a better job and hopefully impress your company more if you're able to increase the profit on that job. And then as it relates to the customer, if you can maintain a good profit margin, but also take care of your customer really well, you're going to be really exceeding in the goals that you're setting out to achieve. So don't get hung up too much on labor for any particular night. So one night you may work a lot of extra hours because the building was a mess and you needed to get it done. And then some other nights you may work less hours, whatever. Look at this thing on maybe a week-to-week trend. And the goal or the idea is that you stay under budget on an ongoing or an average basis, and that the customer is being taken care of. And this should be a number you should watch ongoing all the time. You should be looking at the hours that are in your building. And if the trend moves upwards, it's not a good trend. It means people are spending too much time and you're likely to start losing money. And if it starts trending downwards, you're working too few hours on an ongoing basis, then it's possible you have some quality issues that are about to pop up at that building. So we want to find that balance. We want to be working to improve profitability all the time, but also working to maintain the satisfaction of that customer. So if you balance these two well, you keep this stuff in mind along with the needs of the customer, you're going to do a good job in managing your accounts, and you're going to have happy customers and a happy employer, and hopefully it's going to help you in your career as a manager in the janitorial industry.